Amen. Amen. If you really love the Lord, go ahead and give God a praise right there. We cannot understate the way that people have stepped up in the middle of this pandemic to make sure that Phillips continues to be one Phillips, going higher together, especially when it comes to our music ministry and AV team. Let's give God some praise for them, for leading us and incorporating all kinds of parts of our congregation. And as you know, we are in the middle of our wireless discipleship series where we are walking through this wireless discipleship manual where we are talking about how on the cross shows us a vertical bar. That's how we connect to God, who is our source, who is love. Then there's the horizontal bar on the cross where we start this week that shows us the importance of connecting with others. And then at the end of the series, we talk about the Wi-Fi bars that are on the top, which demonstrate to us how our job as disciples is to connect others to God, connect others to the source. And this week, as we begin to talk about the importance of connecting with each other, we are talking about the importance of the church. Go ahead and look at somebody, type it in the box and say, you need the church. See, they weren't as convicted. I need you to say it with some conviction, with some bass if you got some bass. Say it from the bottom of your feet, from a spiritual place. Say, you need the church. Oh, yes. And so in our chapters in Wireless Discipleship, this goes into how the church is the ultimate social network. And let's come with me to Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4. The Bible reads from the New Revised Standard Version, beginning with the first verse. I, therefore, the prisoner in the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism. The Word of God is already blessed. You need the church because the church is the ultimate social network. We recognize in these times that, especially now, and especially in a day like this when we have come together in this way, that church is not the way it has ever been ever before. As a matter of fact, all over the country, there are different groups and parties that are fighting to make sure that churches get reopened. However, hopefully by the end of this message, what you'll be able to recognize is that the church was never closed. As a matter of fact, there is no government entity, there is no figure, no pastor, no virus that can close the church. As a matter of fact, Jesus put it this way, that not even the gates of hell can prevail against the church. I believe in these moments, unlike any ever before, we have learned the importance of recognizing that church is more than padded pews and stained glass windows and crystal chandeliers. We have learned in these moments more than any other time that the church is not about a place, but the church is about a people. The church is not about a building, but a church is actually a body. And I believe this passage here helps us in particular because what it lets us know is that there is a different transition that happens at the beginning of Ephesians chapter 4, because at the end of chapter 3, the writer is excited about how God has done these great things through the church. The writer is talking about the church, but what happens in chapter 4 is that the writer stops getting the people excited about the church, and then he tells the people that they need to be the church. You see, in the Greek, it goes from the indicative to the imperative. It goes from talking about a thing to telling the thing to be the thing that it was supposed to be. And I believe that what we have found in these times is that we have been called not to stop being church, but we have been called to be church in ways like we never have before. As a matter of fact, in these moments, it's not a time for us to stop being connected and stop being a part of each other, but we have come to a place where we need each other like never before. We need to be connected to each other in a way that we could not even imagine. And so in us being connected, it's time for us to stop talking about the church being closed. It's time for us to stop talking about other stuff and other folks like they are the church, but we are called in this moment to stop talking about the church and to start being the church. And as we are called to be the church, what we'll recognize is that we are able to reach more places than ever before. We're able to touch more people than ever before. We're able to serve in ways like never before. And see, that's why you need the church. You need it. And it's the ultimate social network. Before there was an Instagram, before there was Twitter, before there was Facebook, before there was MySpace. Some of y'all remember that. Before there was Black Planet. Some of y'all remember that. Before there was AOL Messengers. Some of y'all remember that. Before there were any of these connections, there was the church. It was the ultimate social network where people are able to be connected no matter what your race, no matter what your agenda, no matter what your geography is. The church is the ultimate social group where people, no matter what your status or position outside of it is, it does not matter, because the same one who reigns above one of us reigns over all of us. It's good to be a part of something where there are no big I's and little U's, because Jesus didn't shed more blood for somebody else than he shed for you. The good news is that we all come to the same fountain and we get to drink from it freely. We are all a part of that church. And the good news is that as we come together, we have come in some ways to think that the church is an organization. Yes, it has functions. Yes, there are institutional things, but I want you to know you're mistaken if you think that the church is only an organization. The church is more than an organization. The church is an organism. Let me say that again. The church is more than an organization. The church is an organism. What does that mean? It's not just about positions and titles and being in your seat and being in your place, but the church is a body. And as a body, what it represents is that when one of us is going through something, then all of us are going through. And I believe this pandemic has more than ever let us know that we are all in this thing together. What happens down in Alabama is affecting everybody else. What's happening on another part of the world is happening to us, and especially as God's chosen, called out people, we are connected. And let me explain something to you why it's important that we recognize that we're an organization and not an organism. Because when you stomp your toe, you might say an expletive, but you don't have a committee meeting. You don't have to go to the board. You don't have to get a motion and a second and get it approved and voted up or down. When you stomp your toe, your hand goes down to touch it, your mouth says ow, and you move to make it feel better. And similarly, God's people are not called to be caught up in bureaucracy, but we are called to be a body. That's why we got to go from talking about the church to actually be in the church. And in these moments, more than ever before, God is calling us to be connected through this body that is the church. And so there are 3 wisdom points I want you to know tonight, and I'm going to get out of your way so you can go ahead and do what you got to do, whether this morning or this evening. I want to go ahead and get out of your way. There are 3 quick wisdom points we find, particularly around verse 5. And in verse 5, we find that the reason why the church is so important, you need it, and it's the ultimate social network. It has the ability to connect even before there was Wi-Fi and before there was an internet, is because there's one faith. What connects us is our faith. Our first wisdom point is that we have a faith that connects. See, this is why we need the church, this ultimate social network, because there's something that binds us together that's more than the pew you're sitting on. There's something that binds us together that's more than the address on which we reside. There's something that binds us together that's more important than the place where your name is on the roll. There's something that binds us together. It is a faith. It is a belief. It is a trust in one who we have not just heard about, but it's a trust in one who we have come to know for ourselves. We have this one faith. That's why when Jesus was on the plain of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples a question, said, "Who do people say that I am?" And some said Jeremiah, some said John the Baptist, some said one of the other prophets. But Jesus looks boldly in Peter's face and asked, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And then Jesus looked at Peter and said, "And upon this rock I build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." And let me tell you, what Jesus was showing us is that the church is not just some building, not just some institution, but the church is a group of folks who don't mind bearing in their own bodies and with their own witness that they know who Jesus is. That the reason why that the church still exists is because there's been a long-standing witness of folks who know who Jesus is. And I believe that that's the faith that we all share. That's deeper than where you pay your tithes to. That's deeper than what organization you are part of. You are connected to some folks who know who Jesus is. Let me tell you, and this goes back not just all the way back to the very beginning, but people have been carrying this faith from generation to generation to generation. The first disciples, they took this faith and they spread the good news all across the Roman Empire, but they didn't stop there. They took this faith that Jesus passed down to Peter. And this same faith was the same faith that Jesus passed down to Paul. And Paul passed the faith down to Timothy, and Timothy passed it down to Clement, and Clement passed that faith down to Augustus, and Augustine passed that faith down to Martin Luther, and Martin Luther passed that faith down to John Wesley, and John Wesley passed that faith down all the way to Cox and Asbury passed that faith on down to McTeer, and McTyre passed that faith down to Bishop William Miles in the CME church, and Miles passed that faith on down through this church, and our ancestors who were 42 slaves in the CME church, they passed that faith down to us. And the faith that we have, it has come through so many tears. We have come over the way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughter. This faith we have is not something for us to take lightly, but we have this treasure in earthen vessels so that the excellency of the powers of God and not of us. We got a faith that connects us. Y'all said, "I don't know who all them people you just called, Pastor, but what I do know is that this faith I have, I didn't get it from myself. Mama passed this faith down to me. I know that this faith I have, I don't know them other folks you called, but Meemaw had some faith that I was able to build on, and I'm here today not because I always knew what to believe, but because they showed me that if you train up a child in the way they should go, when they grow old, they won't depart. I'm so glad that the faith I have today is the offspring of some faith that was planted in me. Is there anybody else out there that can say that the faith that's in you didn't just spring up in you, but there were some folks? That's why the seasoned saints get excited when they say somebody prayed for me, had me on their mind, and took the time to pray for me. I'm so glad we've got one faith. But not only do we have one faith that connects, but it also says one Lord. So we also have a founder who connects us. And whether you're in any institution, Greek or otherwise, it's important that you know your founder. Because the founder, as I was just talking about, helps you to kind of see what the organization or the organism is all about. That when you know who the founder is, it lets you know what you are about to be a part of. And what we are a part of with this one Lord is one who, even though he was the Lord of all, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation and took upon him the form of a servant. We are a part of something. This is why we need the church, because not only is it big that there was somebody who has a faith that passed down to us, but our founder came down from his lofty place in glory and decided to save us and save our messy and trifling selves, came to look after us. And the good news is that we have a founder who, even though he could have sat high and decided to let us wallow in our own muck and mire, still didn't mind coming, and according to the Message version, came and moved in our neighborhood, moved on our side of town. And not only did he move there, but then at the end of his life, he came down and had dinner. You know, you got to really know somebody to eat at their house and to eat with them, especially when you know they nasty. As a matter of fact, you might even just avoid eating at their house, but Jesus came and dined with us. And that's the beauty of when we have communion, and why you need the church and for us to be connected through these sacraments, because it reminds us that even in a place where we should not have had a seat at the table, the Lord provides a seat for us at the table. When other folks want to count you out and disqualify you and tell you you're not good enough, the church reminds you that you may not get to sit in the C-suite, but there's a seat at the Lord's table, that you may not be able to have the biggest sphere of influence, but you actually have an audience with the one who is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. That's why we call it communion, because when we fall on our knees with our face to the rising sun, we can say, Lord, have mercy. But when we say have mercy on me, we should say, Lord, have mercy on us, because we recognize that we all are at the same level when we come to him on our knees. One Lord. One Lord. There's a founder that connects us. But then it says, finally, that there's one baptism. So we have one faith that connects us, one founder that connects us, and finally, we have one focus that connects us. How does baptism get us to focus? Because the reason why all of us are a part of this ultimate social network, no matter which organization, which site or which type of platform you use, even if it's an email, one of the first things you have to do is to create a name to identify yourself. You got to be able to say what your email name is, how you want your name displayed, and what your handle is. And when you become part of God's social network, you have to get a name change. But unfortunately, I have to let you know that the limit on the list is very narrow. And as a matter of fact, if you went to look for your own name, you wouldn't find it on the list. Even if you went and looked for the name of the most sainted person you know, in God's network, you wouldn't find that name. Because in God's network, there's only one real name that matters. There's only one real name that can give you access and the opportunity and the ability to receive everything that God has in store. And as good as my name is, my name is not good enough to make it on that list. The only name that can get you into that connection is the one that Isaiah said, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. So baptism lets us know, according to Romans 6, that when you go down in the water, you are showing that your likeness to his death. But when you are raised from the water, you are brought up in his likeness, and your name changes in this act of initiation, and you no longer represent yourself, but you go down as you, but you come up as Christ. Your name changes in baptism, because you no longer represent yourself, but we are a part of a group, of an entity that does not just look at us, but we stand to represent Jesus Jesus the Christ. That's why we can say in the words of that great hymn that when he shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I then in him be found, dressed in his righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the throne. And the good news about baptism, it's our focus, because it reminds us that the reason why we are a part of this is not just because somebody else told us to do it. It's not just because it's something nice to do, but the reason why we're here is because there has been a wonderful change in our life has been wrought since Jesus came into our life. And what we as a church, our goal is not just to have a place to be a hotel for saints, but it's to be a hospital for sinners, because what we recognize is that the reason why we come to church is not just so that we can look at each other and look good, which is something we can't do anymore, but what we've learned now more than ever is the reason why the church exists is so that somebody else might be able to see who Jesus is. You see, the reason why we're here is not about us, but the reason why we're here is because we recognize that there is something about this place, there is something about that Jesus, and that Jesus has changed our life. And since Jesus has changed our life, we recognize that the same way he changed us, he can change somebody else. And the same way he connected us, God can connect somebody else. Come here, John Newton, he understood this when he said, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like you and me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see him. Is there anybody out there? Is there anybody out there that can say the reason why I'm glad to be a part of the church is because this is the one place that has the one job to make sure the world gets saved. We're not here to pay the light bill. We pay the light bill because we here. We're not here to pay the utility bill, but we pay the utility bill because we're here. Why are we here, preacher? How to reach the masses, men of every birth. For an answer, Jesus gave the key. He said, if I be lifted up from the earth, he said, I'll draw all people unto me. You need the church because you've got folks in your family that still need to be drawn. You need the church because you've got people at your job that still need to be drawn. You need the church because it's folks in your house that still need to be drawn. And the reason why we're glad to be a part of the church, because as long as there's a world and as long as there's a church, God is still saying, whosoever will, let them come. Is there anybody out there that can say, I thank God for the church? Because if it wasn't for the church, I wouldn't have heard the good news. If it wasn't for the church, I wouldn't be baptized. If it wasn't for the church, I wouldn't have the sacrament. If it wasn't for the church, and because I'm thankful, I'm not going to keep a praise to myself. I'm going to go ahead and give God glory. Even if I'm not in this building, I'm grateful that Jesus said, where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I'll be in the midst. I'm going to give you 2 seconds to look around and count. I want you to count real quick. Go ahead and count real quick. That's enough time to count. All you need to count was to 1, because you plus 1 other person. This is where 2 or 3 are gathered. Jesus is in the mix. And I don't know what you went through today. I don't know what you're going through right now. But when I get with my brothers and sisters, whether in person or whether online, I get some comfort because Jesus comes in the room. And I came to let you know that whatever room you're in, because of the church, Jesus, he's in the room. I said he's in the room. I said he's in the room. He's in the room. Go ahead and look at somebody. Say he's in the room. Tap it on the chat and type it in and say he's in the room. 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 And since he's in the room, healing is in the room. Since he's in the room, joy is in the room. Since he's in the room, peace is in the room. And since he's here, you might as well give God glory. Since he's here, you might as well praise him. And since we're here, we might as well have a little church. Is there anybody that wants to give God some praise and thank God for the church? I'm going to give you 15 seconds to open up your mouth and say thank you. Oh, somebody can feel him right now. Somebody's been holding it all week long, but he's in the room. I know it's Lay Day, but you can shout on Lay Day because God is in the room. I got to quit, but somebody say, Pastor, I got my hands lifted right now. Pastor, I got tears in my eyes. I've been socially distanced, but I'm so glad to know that even when I'm socially distanced, because of the church, I don't have to be spiritually distant. Oh, because God is in the room. Now listen, what I want you to know is that the Jesus I'm preaching about, the one that you can put your trust in, the one who came from heaven to create a seat at the table for you, the one who saved a wretch like me and can save you. He's saying if you trust him, no matter how disconnected you have been, you can be connected to God. He came so that you could be connected. Would you put your trust in him to connect you today?